So what is Cypress? Cypress is a JavaScript-based test automation tool and framework for web developers. You can use Cypress to write automated tests for the website you're currently working on. Now you can use Cypress for automated testing in two main ways. You can use it to write so-called end-to-end tests, and you can also use it to write so-called component tests, though this course here will be about end-to-end tests. Now, the idea behind end-to-end tests is that you have automated tests that test entire application flows. For example, the user authentication flow, where a user enters data into some input fields, hits the enter key, and then is logged in. You might want to test whether this entire flow works correctly, and you could write an end-to-end test with help of Cypress to do just that. And indeed, this exact flow will be one of the many examples we will take a look at throughout this course. Now, component tests are about testing individual UI elements, individual UI building blocks. For example, you could test if a modal overlay component works and looks correctly. You can write these kinds of tests with Cypress as well, though this course will be about Cypress for end-to-end testing, not for component tests. Nonetheless, what you learn in this course will also help you if you then decide to also take a look at component tests thereafter. End-to-end testing is all about testing these complete flows. That could be such a user authentication flow. It could also be that you want to test whether to-do items are added correctly to your to-do list. So you want to test those entire application flows. And understanding the idea behind end-to-end tests is crucial because you might also know another form of automated tests, and that would be unit tests or unit testing. I do also have a course on unit testing because that is also another important form of testing, but it's crucial to understand the differences between these two approaches and when to use which approach. It's important to understand that these two approaches are both important and are not really alternatives to each other, but instead should best be used in conjunction. The idea behind unit testing, as you also learn in my dedicated unit testing course if you want to, is that you test small individual building blocks of an application. For example, whether a given function works as intended. The idea, however, is that you don't test the combination of components or functions so that you don't test entire flows, but that you test the individual building blocks instead, and you therefore can ensure the correct functionality of those individual units. However, of course, with unit tests alone, you can't ensure that those units work correctly once they're being combined. So unit tests don't guarantee the functionality of the overall system. And therefore, that's where end-to-end testing comes into play. Unit testing is important to test your individual building blocks and find errors early when those blocks break. But you then also have end-to-end testing to test those complete application workflows as mentioned, like that login flow. And therefore, with end-to-end testing, you can ensure the overall functionality of the entire app or of those key application processes and workflows. With end-to-end testing, you're not necessarily covering all possible combinations of those different units, but you of course try to cover the most important workflows and features of your application. And combined with unit testing, you hopefully achieve a state of automated testing in a given project that allows you to cover all major building blocks and flows and catch errors and bugs early. This npm install Cypress command, which we also find on the official Cypress website. Now this installs this Cypress tool into this project, and once this was installed, once this Cypress dependency was added, we can run npx, not npm, but npx cypress open. And this command will now use that dependency which we just installed and open the Cypress application on this system. After running npx cypress open, you should get a window that looks something like this. And what you're seeing here is the Cypress application, a tool created by the Cypress developers, which we can use to manage and run our tests thereafter. Now, when we're starting this tool, we have to decide whether we're going to write and run some end-to-end tests or component tests, though you can also have both types of tests in the same project. Now, this course is about end-to-end testing, so that's what we're going to pick. And as you see, it's currently not configured, since this is the first time I'm running this command in this new project. So when we click this, we now get this initial configuration step, automatically managed by Cypress. And here in the end, Cypress just tells us which extra files have been added to this project. For example, a cypress.config.js file, which could be used for configuring the testing behavior of Cypress in this project. Here we just confirm this by clicking continue. And then we can choose in which browser we want to run our tests. Because Cypress actually supports different browsers, if you have Firefox installed, you should see Firefox as an option here as well. But I'll use Chrome here throughout this entire course. And therefore now if you click Start E2E Testing here, a new browser window should open with that Cypress application running inside of it. This is still an extra application provided by the Cypress team, which we will use to then run and evaluate our tests. Now, since this is the first time this is starting and we haven't written any tests yet, it asks us whether it should create some example tests, which we could use to learn Cypress and see some, well, examples in action, or if we want to create one single, basically empty testing file, which we can then use to write our own tests. Now, seeing these examples can be very useful for exploring some Cypress commands and learning Cypress. But since you have this course for learning it already, we will actually use this empty spec file here, this empty file, and write a test from scratch. We can then give this a name, and here I'll just name it first test. You should keep the .ci.js extension, and you should also keep the folder, which it's suggesting here. I just changed the file name, or the part in front of the extension, to first-test. With that, we can create this spec file with this dummy content and click OK, run the spec. And with that, what Cypress does thereafter is it executes this testing file. And from this point on, when this application is running, as you add new testing files, Cypress will run them for you, you can rerun them, and when you reopen this application after you closed it, and you can close it like any other regular browser window, so after you closed it, if you rerun it, Cypress will run all the testing files it finds in your project again. And keep in mind, you can always reopen it by rerunning this npx cypress open command. So that's how we install and run this Cypress tool. Of course, we're going to take a closer look at this tool and what we can do in there throughout this course. But with that out of the way and this up and running, let's now write some Cypress testing code. So we installed Cypress, we started this Cypress application, and it should still be up and running at this point. This process, which was started with npx cypress open, should still be up and running. You should have this running process in your terminal here. And you should now have some files that have been added. Now, we'll take a closer look at these files throughout the course when we need them. At the moment, it's just important to recognize that we have this Cypress folder. And in there, this E2E folder contains the actual testing files, which we'll work on. And you can add more test files here, and you can write your tests in those test files. What's important is that those files end with .ci.js, because that will tell Cypress that it should pick up those files, look into them, and run those tests it finds inside of them. So this extension matters. So it's this first-test.ci.js file, which we created in the previous lecture. And in there, we find one example test suite with one example test. This describe function, which is provided by Cypress, is used to create a test suite, which is simply a collection of tests. And then this it function, which is also provided by Cypress, creates a single test. So here we have one test in one test suite. You can, of course, add multiple suites and also multiple tests if you want to. Now here, this is just a dummy test, but every test you create with this it function has a description, a name, so to say, which is totally up to you. and then a function as a second argument, which contains the actual testing code. And it's inside of this function here where you then use these various Cypress commands to tell Cypress in detail which steps it should take on your website to test a certain behavior. Here it just visits an example page, and therefore this test at the moment always succeeds because this page is visited successfully. But again, we'll learn more about these different commands and how to combine them and what you can do with them throughout this course. Now here for this course and for this first test that we're writing ourselves, we of course don't want to visit this dummy site here, but instead we want to visit this site here, which runs our local React application. Therefore, I'll copy this URL and paste this here into this visit command. Now, the visit command is executed on this CI object, which is, as you might guess, provided by Cypress, and it in the end instructs Cypress to visit a given URL. In this case, this local URL, which will work because Cypress also runs locally on our machine. So visiting local sites will be no problem. So with that, we changed this step to make a bit more sense for our application. If we save this and we go back, we see that this test failed though. We see that it failed because it failed to load this site, and in the end it failed because the connection was refused. And this happened because our local development server that hosts this site is actually not running anymore. At least I stopped it here on my system. If I try to reload this page in the browser, this website page, I also fail here. I stopped this development server when I started the Cypress app, and therefore in order to make sure that Cypress is able to visit this, we have to restart this development server, this React application server. Of course, I don't want to stop the npx Cypress open process though, because this Cypress application here also should keep up and running. And therefore what I'll do is I'll open a second terminal window, and in there I run npm run dev to restart this React application development server. And with that up and running, we can successfully reload and visit this page. And we can now also go back to the Cypress application, rerun all our tests with this icon up here. And now you see that this test passed. And we actually even get a screenshot here that shows us what Cypress saw, so to say. And this test passes because the only step we have in this test at the moment is that we want to visit this page. And therefore, if that succeeds and Cypress is able to visit that page, the test is marked as successful. Now, in many cases, you don't just want to visit a page, you want to do things on that page, or you want to validate that certain elements are visible on the page. So you might want to write more complex tests, and we're of course going to do that throughout the course. But this is a first basic test that shows us how we can generally get started with Cypress. So now that we get this first basic succeeding test, let's make it a bit more meaningful and useful. Just visiting the page is not enough. Instead here, for this dummy demo application, this very simple first website here, we might want to ensure that this page is not just loaded successfully, but that we can actually see those 6 course goals. Or we might not care about the exact goal texts that we see, but we might care about the fact that we see 6 course goals. We might want to ensure that this page is loaded correctly and displays exactly 6 course goals. And that would be a very common expectation you want to check with help of Cypress, that certain elements are visible or that a certain amount of elements are visible. Things like that, as you will see throughout this course. To add this extra check to our test here, we can use the CI object. And on this object, we can now call the get function. This is another built-in function, another built-in command provided by Cypress, just like the visit command. We can use this command to search for certain DOM elements on a page that was loaded with help of visit. So we first visit a page, and then in a second step, we search for a certain element. Here in this example, if we use the developer tools to inspect this render DOM, we can see that in the end, these course goals are list items inside of such an unordered list in the main element. And indeed here for this simple page, these are the only list items we have on the entire page. So what we can do to find those list items is we can pass a CSS selector to the get function, so a string that contains a CSS selector, and just search for the li tag. Now, for more complex websites, this might not do, because you might have different li elements in different areas of the page, but for this first basic example here, this is good enough. And this will find us all these list items we have on the page, so in this case, all these 6 course goals. And that's also important. Get does not stop at the first element it finds. Instead here, if it finds multiple elements, it gives us multiple elements. We can then chain another command here by adding another dot after that, and then use the should function to formulate an expectation. And then to should, you pass a string, and in there you can, for example, write half.length, and then separate by a comma, specify the length. Now, this is one of the many possible expectations you can formulate, and throughout the course you will learn where to find all possible expectations and where to find other commands like get and should. But for the moment, that's what we want to write here. This will check that we have 6 list items so that we get a list of list items here that has a length of 6. That's what we're writing here. And if you then save this, the tests will automatically rerun, but you can also rerun them manually by clicking this button. And once you do that, you see the test still passes because it gets those list items. If you hover over get li, you even see what was selected by Cypress, which is very useful. And of course, that were 6 items, so this expectation was met and the test passed. Now, that's the quick start. Of course, we're going to learn more about these commands, how to combine them, where to find them, where to find all these possible expectations. But that's how you can get started with Cypress and how you can write the first Cypress test. And with that, it's of course time to dive deeper. So now before we dive into Cypress and start using it, I want to explain what you can expect from this course and how you can make sure that you get the most out of this course. This is a getting started course, which means you need no prior Cypress knowledge. You should have some prior web development knowledge though, because Cypress is a tool that's used for testing web applications, and you should know how to generally build such web applications. Otherwise, this course will definitely be very challenging to follow along and to understand. Now, since this is a getting started course, in this course, we'll start from scratch when it comes to Cypress, and we'll explore all core Cypress concepts at concrete examples. Now, these core concepts include not just the basics, but also some advanced concepts. All that being said, though, we'll not dive into niche scenarios, we'll not dive into running Cypress in the cloud or into CI/CD integration or anything like that, but instead we'll focus on the core Cypress features and how to write Cypress tests. And for that, we're going to explore common problems and solutions along the way. By the end of the course, you will therefore have a solid understanding of the core Cypress concepts, and you will have a solid Cypress foundation, and you will be ready to dive deeper into Cypress and start applying Cypress to your own projects. Now, my goal with this course is to make sure that you get as much out of this course as possible. That, of course, starts with the videos. It's a video-based course, a video-on-demand course to be precise, and therefore, of course, you should watch these videos, but watch them at your pace. Use the video player controls to slow me down if I'm going too fast or speed me up if I'm going too slow. You can, of course, also skip entire videos if I'm covering a certain concept you already know, but generally, you should watch the videos in the order in which they are presented to you to get the most out of this course. Since it is an on-demand course, you can also repeat videos whenever you need to, and you should definitely use this feature because it's totally normal that you maybe forgot about a certain concept, that maybe one video wasn't super clear to you when you watched it the first time and you therefore want to watch it a second time. So definitely take advantage of this on-demand nature of this course. Now, in this course, I'll show you many examples, and you will get more out of this course if you also code along, if you try things on your own, if you follow along in code whilst watching the videos. For that, of course, you should also pause the videos from time to time to try things on your own. I won't prompt you to do that in this course, at least not too often, but you should do it nonetheless. Practice whilst watching these videos. Don't wait for me to tell you that you should do it. Instead, pause the video, try the next step on your own, write some tests that we're not writing in the videos, and practice what you learned. Of course, also in your own projects. So in your own dummy or demo projects you might be working on. In the next lecture, you also find a link to all the slides that come with this course and also to various code snapshots that you can use to take a look at when getting stuck when following along with the course examples. I do have various code snapshots in that next lecture that you can use to compare your code to mine and potentially find out why a certain test is working for me in the video, but not for you locally on your system. And last but not least, of course, you should also help each other. We have the Q&A section where you can ask and answer, and where I, of course, also try to help you, but you should also help each other, because by answering the questions of fellow students, you will learn even more, because you're forced to think about a problem and come up with a solution. And even if your solution is wrong, well, someone will correct you and you'll learn even more. So definitely take this as an opportunity. But don't just use the Q&A section for that. Also consider joining our amazing Discord community, to which you also find a link in the next lecture, which is a great place to meet fellow developers, discuss anything related to development, and also totally not related to development if you want to, and use this community to grow together with us.